What's up, everybody? Big news as of last week. The killer of Ron and Nicole has finally been brought to justice. Wow, I find this crazy, considering that the moment that killer died, the one that everyone's been looking for 30 years on every golf course in LA, finally, the killer's been brought to justice, and at that moment, O.J. Simpson, the man who's been looking all over for that guy, dies as well. How ironic. He stayed true to his words. He vowed right after. There was a letter written after he was let go, after he was acquitted. He said, "I vow never to rest until the killers have finally been brought to justice." He stayed true to his word. You can't say he didn't. He did. So the juice has finally expired. I think it's a lot sooner than a lot of people anticipated. It seemed to come out of seemingly nowhere. Not a lot of people knew that he had, I think it was prostate cancer. I found out about that. He made a video on was it TikTok? I think it might have been both, because I follow him on social media just to see what he's up to. And he's like, "What? Hospice? Hospice? I'm not in hospice." Which I don't know if that's true or not, but apparently his close family and friends, they knew he wasn't doing too well. They knew this was gonna happen. Obviously I feel, of course, sympathy for them, for having to, go through something like this. It's always tough to lose a loved one. Same with the families too. I hope that, now that he's gone, that they feel they feel like justice has been served a little bit, that they can perhaps rest easier. I don't know exactly how they feel, but of course I have, deep sympathy for them as well, for having lost their loved ones in such a brutal way, many years ago. And to be put through the amount of things that they were put through, the whole trial. I mean, I can't imagine being in that position. It had to be torture. But anyway, the media sort of reacted to it, and they didn't seem to know what to do with it. They kind of treated OJ as if he was like a controversial figure in some sort of way. Like, oh, he did all these wonderful things, like he rushed for 2,000 yards in 1973, he won the Heisman, he was a Hall of Famer, he was so funny in Naked Gun, which is true. I mean, I've seen Naked Gun several times, and he's hilarious in it. Obviously, he's one of the greatest running backs of all time, one of the greatest college players of all time. That's undeniable, right? But then there's the second half of his life where he did something so terrible, so unthinkable, that it shocked everyone. He tried to get his stuff back, and he was put in prison for it. I mean, the guy literally went into a casino with a gun, held people at gunpoint, and was put in prison for it. That's crazy. And there it is. That's his legacy. He was a great football player. Funny actor, Heisman Trophy winner, who also committed a terrible, well, not really a terrible crime. I mean, I think 33 years is kind of harsh. They let him out in 9, but 33 years is kind of harsh. So that's the life of O.J. Simpson. I feel like I'm leaving something out, aren't I? Oh yeah, he also killed 2 people. Yeah, so there's that as well. I mean, there's a lot of people out there still who believe that he didn't do it, but I am just about as certain as you could possibly be that he was guilty for murdering Ron and Nicole. The only reason that I'm willing to hold it up there is basically by technicality. I'll say because I wasn't there. I mean, technically, no matter how many of us want to speculate and look into this case, the truth is we really don't know for sure that he did it. I mean, I wasn't there. You weren't there. Nobody was there. The only eyewitness was a dog. And so the media kind of treated it like, yeah, he was acquitted. A lot of people think he did it. But he was also, and this is factual, he was found liable for the deaths of Ron and Nicole in a civil court. And that's by preponderance of evidence. That's not by, all reasonable doubt, right? And so some people want to say, like, well, he was found not guilty, right? And so people will say, oh, well, he was found not guilty, so how could you call him a murderer? Well, he was found responsible for their deaths in civil court, so if you want to be technical, that's also true. And listen, I don't mean to revel in somebody's like death exactly, right? Like I'm not celebrating his death. You know, I don't think it's appropriate that anybody else does that either. But there's a lot of people online making jokes about it, and I'm sorry, but they're funny, all right? I will never not laugh at Norm Macdonald just completely shitting on O.J. Simpson, just time and time again on SNL, which is basically what got him fired because one of the executives apparently was friends with O.J. or just didn't think he was funny, and that's what got him fired. If you look at I'll play some clips of it, but I just want to go over the case real quick, if maybe some of you aren't familiar with it. So on June 12th of 94, Ron and Nicole were found dead. Nicole, of course, was his wife. Ron was a friend of hers. And immediately, OJ was the suspect, and they charged him very quickly. There was a ton of evidence against him, and then he fled the scene. And of course, there's the famous Bronco chase where people were like, you know, just completely in shock, and, you know, everybody's on the side of the road. There's people on bridges cheering, waving, just wanting to watch this insane thing that's happening right now. And it became pretty clear really early on to a lot of people that he was guilty, right? And of course, his friend AC was driving the car, just trying to save his life. OJ was in the back, apparently with a gun to his head. You know, of course, he survived. He was taken to prison right after that. And right away, I mean, immediately after he was charged, America, like, had pretty much already, I don't want to say convicted him, but most people already believed that he was guilty. I mean, if you look at the polls, I think it was already like 2/3 of people already believed that he was guilty, and he pretty much stayed that way throughout the entire trial. I can pull up the polls in a minute. And all the trial really did was just convince more and more people that of what they already thought they knew, that he was a murderer. And when he was let off, or before the verdict came, it wasn't a question so much as to whether or not he had actually done it, but was there enough reasonable doubt to actually convict him. And I think that's really the big debate, not whether or not he did it, because you got to remember, in a trial, in an actual trial where you're put on and there's a jury, it has to be beyond all reasonable doubt, right? I want to go through the evidence real quick. You know, obviously his blood was at the crime scene. Nicole's blood was in his car, on his socks, at his home. All three of their bloods, Nicole's, Ron's, and OJ's, were on both gloves. Those gloves were identical. They apparently were purchased by Nicole years prior in Bloomingdale's in New York, where they only sold, like, I think 100 pairs of extra large Eris gloves. A knit cap there that had hairs that were linked to OJ. His DNA evidence was there that linked to only one in like 170 million people. Yeah, 170 million people. There was fiber evidence that came from the cap that were in his Bronco that were at the crime scene. A lot of people speculate. They're like, where did the clothes and the knife go? Well, some people say like Robert Kardashian had something to do with it, that it was in that garment bag that everyone thinks that's where the clothes were. No, I think what happened was he actually went to the airport with 3 bags. I'm not sure if it was the Skycap or somebody else actually saw him near the trash can where he was actually emptying things out of the bag, and then apparently he got on the plane with 2 bags, and then you know, he went to Chicago, and then he flew back and he only had 2 bags with him. So it's pretty clear to me that's probably where the clothes and the knife were, right? So that's the hard evidence against him. Obviously he had a history of abuse. The car chase, obviously, which, I mean, usually when somebody flees the scene of a crime, it looks like they're guilty, right? Now that mostly comes down to speculation. That's not hard evidence, but it certainly says things. The prosecution made some terrible screw-ups. Prosecutor Chris Darden had him try on those gloves, which was a humongous error, and it completely collapsed. And you know, that gave people the belief that, like, okay, wow, those gloves don't fit. Maybe those gloves were planted because Mark Furman, who was, you know, a racist, he was a racist cop. He didn't actually plant the gloves. At least I don't believe. It gave people like, okay, this guy, the gloves don't fit, so he planted the gloves, and then he was heard on tape saying all these terrible things about black people, and you know, just other terrible things, and it gave the jury reasonable doubt, and the defense was perfect in sort of telling that story, sort of describing the facts, and then taking all these little bits of evidence and then leading it toward that the cops were trying to set OJ up, and then jury were like, yeah, that's reasonable doubt, and he was let go. So just to wrap this up, I want to react to a few clips of Norm Macdonald, just some of his best ones of him just completely shitting on OJ. Satan's Twitter or X account said this: OJ Simpson just arrived down here. What the fuck? And then he says, "There's a knife and some gloves missing down here." Satan also says he's waiting for his lawyers to get down here before he answers. Always wanted to cut it up with OJ, be there shortly. OJ running from the demons in hell. Oh my god, man. This is nuts. OJ realizing murder gets you into hell. Oh, and I forgot to mention, he also wrote a book saying if I did it, and then described not exactly how he did it, but then he said, like, this is hypothetical, but I don't remember certain things. You don't remember a hypothetical, which is just stupid. I mean, all it did was just say, okay, yeah, you're definitely guilty.
O.J. Simpson's lawyers have decided to skip hearings on DNA evidence and go right to trial. Asked why they did this, the lawyers replied, "We want to get O.J. acquitted as speedily as possible so he can get back to doing what he does best.
Killing people." I remember that.
Well, let's get to O.J. O.J. Simpson's lawyers say they don't want the families of Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman in the courtroom during the trial. They're afraid the presence of the family members will just remind O.J. of how much more killing he still has to do. Well, O.J. Simpson's lawyers stopped feuding this week, finally. The Dream Team, F. Lee Bailey and Robert Shapiro, were able to put aside their differences and express their admiration for each other after O.J. threatened to cut their heads off.
Love this one. Love this one.
Great, man. He became the first defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy. And congratulations, Charles. That is something that no one can ever take away from you. Unless you kill your wife and a waiter, in which case...
My god. Just look at everyone's reaction to this. That's Ken Griffey Jr. reacting. Oh my god. So yeah, I guess that wraps it up. Let me turn this up. That wraps it up. Rest in peace, O.J. Simpson. That's to say, if you're somehow not the real killer, rest in peace. If not, then, well, I guess it's up to God to decide what your fate is. I'll see you guys.